स्वाध्याय टीवी डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी।
Namaste dear students, I Dr. HIMANSHU Patel welcome you from the Chaitanya studio of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar Open University. We are in lecture series on mobile application development in Android. Before we start, let us have look at the last lecture details. In last lecture, we have discussed how to create a Google Map project in Android Studio, how to get a Google Map API key for distributing your project, how to use support map fragment for displaying map fragment, and how to use fragment activity for displaying map. And we have also added marker on Google Map at specified city or address. In today's session, we learn how to create your own services and use them to perform background task asynchronously, how to perform long running task in a separate thread, how to perform repeated task in a service, and finally, we see how to establish communication between activity and services. So, today's topic is services. Before we start further, first we define what is service is. So, a service is an application in Android that runs in the background without needing to interacting with the user. We take two examples. First, suppose you want to run application and at a time you want to play background music. So, what you can do is you can implement this playing background music as a service which does not need any user interaction. So, your activity is represented your application and service representing this playing background music. Now, we take second example. Suppose you want to continually log the geographical coordinates of the device, and when particular location is reached, you want to do something. So, what you can do is this logging activity can be implemented as a service and it runs in background without interacting with user. So, now hope you understand what is services are. Like any other activity, we can have steps for creating services. So, these are the steps for creating any service. First, you have to define a my service class, which may be any name that extends the service base class. So, my service is a example name. You can have any name for your class which must extend the service base class. Now, once you extend this class, you have to define or implement three methods. First method is onBind, another method is onStart command, and lastly onDestroy. So, these three methods you have to define within your class which represents service. We discuss these methods shortly, but before that we want to learn how to start and stop your service. So, for that we have methods available to start and stop services. The first method is shown in a red color on screen, which is a start service, and inside this start service you specify intent which represent your service. Here my service is a name of your service class and it is used to start service. Similarly, we have another functions for stop service explicitly. Again it takes intent which represent your service, and there is another functions available for stopping service, which is a stop self that you can call inside service itself and is the equivalent of calling the stop service method to stop the service. So, this is how we can start and stop service. Now, we discuss three methods of service class: onBind, onStart command and onDestroy one by one. So, first method is on bind. The on bind method enables you to bind an activity to a service. This in turn enables an activity to directly access member and methods inside a service. Your activity actually starts your service, and if you bind your activity to service, then you can access its member. The second method is on start command. When we call start service method, it will actually start this method inside service, which is on start command. So, it is called when you start the service explicitly using start service method, and you have to write down your code for the task to be performed by service inside this method, and in this method we return normally constant start underscore sticky, so that the service will continue to run until it is explicitly stopped. So, this is on start command. The last method is on destroy, which is generally called when you explicitly stop your services. The on destroy method is called when service is stopped using stop service method, and it is the place where you can clean up the resources used by your services. So, we discuss what is services and how to implement service in your program. Sometimes you want to perform some repeated task in a service. Let us take one example. Suppose you have set an alarm clock that runs persistently in the background to check whether a pre-scheduled time has been reached, so that an alarm can be sounded. So, alarm service has to continuously monitor for whether we reach to pre-scheduled time or not. So, these can be implemented as a services, and you have to continuously check whether this time is reached or not. So, these kind of repeated work can be performed inside services, and for that we have used timer class. So, a timer class is used to execute block of code to be executed at regular time interval within your service. Now, inside timer class we have one method called schedule at fixed rate, and it is used to execute code repeatedly. Here on screen you can see our method takes 3 argument. First is a timer task, second is a delay, and last is a period. So, whatever you write down inside this schedule at fixed rate will be executed at interval specified in last argument, which is a period. So, first is the task to schedule, delay is the amount of time in millisecond before first execution. Suppose you want to start your service after 5 seconds after your start service method is called. So, you can specify this delay inside second argument, and once your service starts, this last argument specifies amount of time in millisecond between subsequent execution. So, at whatever number we specify inside period in millisecond, at that much time your task is repeated. So, this is how we can perform repeated task inside services. Now, when you write down your service, you have to start your service and then you have to explicitly stop your services. But what will happen that sometimes we forgot to stop services. So, it continuously run in background. The solution for this problem is your service should be automatically stopped when once it is finished its task. So, for that we can use intent service class. Now, to create service that runs a task asynchronously and terminates itself when it is done, for these you can use the intent service class. In this case, your task is run as a separate thread and it is automatically finished when your service finishes its task. So, you need not to call stop service method, it will automatically finished and it does not runs in background for unnecessary reason. So, this is how we can use intent service for performing task and automatically stop when job done. Now, next point is getting between a service and an activity. Sometimes we require that we want to pass data between activity to service and service to activity. So, for that we have one option. We want to suppose send data from activity to service. So, what you can do is you can put data inside intent which can be get in services. So, in start service we pass one intent and whatever data you want to provide to your service can be put inside this intent using put method. Now, suppose you want to inform activity when a service has finished its execution. So, what you can do inside service is you can broadcast an intent using the send broadcast method. Now, how to receive this broadcast inside your activity? So, you listen for this intent in activity using the register receiver method from the intent filter class. So, inside service you have to call send broadcast and inside activity you have to receive this intent using broadcast receiver and you can perform whatever you want. So, this is how we can establish communication between service and activity. Now, we want to write down a application that performs certain task using services. So, we write an application that implements services listed on screen. So, first we write down service which download text file using service and display it in edit text when downloading finished. Second, we write down one service which logs counter which starts from 1 and incremented by 1 at an interval of 1 second. So, this is example of repetitive task. So, we can implement these using one service. And finally, we want to make use of intent service functionality. So, we write down service which download text file using intent service and display it in edit text when downloading finished. In first case you have to stop service explicitly and in last case you have to just start service and forgot about stopping service. It will automatically stop when job is finished. So, let us start writing these services in Android Studio. So, here on screen you can see that I have write down one Android Studio project for performing these tasks. Here is a files that I write down. So, first we write down one service activity which is your main activity and layout for these service activity is shown on a screen. Here you can see that we have buttons available on layout. First is a start download service which download your text file and these stop download service will stop that service. Then we want to display counter in log at a regular interval of 1 second. So, to start that service we have button start timer services and when you want to stop these services we have used this button stop timer services and finally, we have one button which is a start download intent service. So, in this case the same functionality of first two button is performed using intent services and there is no need to stop this service. So, we have not include stop button. Here one edit text is there in which we display downloaded file. So, this is all about our interface. So, these interface you have to create in order to write down main activity and these service activity is our main activity where we implement our logic. So, we go to activity file. Here you can see our activity represent action bar activity and we have 5 buttons. So, we declare 5 button which is a used to represent button in design time with name start download, stop download, start timer, stop timer and start intent. Here we declare one intent filter to receive text data sent by our services. Inside onCreate, first we set our layout using set content view method, and then we take references of our 5 button in design time with ID similar to our button object. So, here first we take reference of our all buttons, then inside start download button, which is our first button, we call one service is name download service. So, we already discussed this start service method. It takes one argument of type intent which represent our download services. So, these download services we have already write down inside our package, and we want to start that activity. And inside stop download, we want to stop these activity with name download service, which is responsible for downloading text file. Similarly, inside start timer service button, we call timer service class or start service with name time service, which is already included in our package, and when stop timer button is pressed, we stop these timer service. And lastly, in start intent service, we start one service with name download intent service, which is already included in our package name. So, this is how these 5 button works. Now, before we understand these, we look at the services class. So, first service is our download services. So, remember, when first button is pressed, we start these services. Now, how to add these service in your project? For that, you have to right click on package, and then you have to select new, and inside new there is a option service, and here we have 2 options. First option add normal service, and second option add intent service. So, here we take services service option, and it will automatically ask for these name download service that I specify, and inside these it creates one constructor and onBind method. So, when you start services, as discussed in theory, we have these on start command method is automatically called. So, in toast we display service started, and here we first check whether network connection is available or not. If it is available, we try to download text file with specified URL, and if network connection is not available, we simply display internet is not connected. Now, these check network connection function we have already discussed in networking session, and we have also discussed this download text file and download image file in networking session. So, we are not going to explore these 2 methods, but we assume that when this download is finished, inside this download text file we call message handler. So, in last this message handler is executed, and inside this message handler we create one intent with name broadcast intent, and we put these variable text which represent our text file and give it name text. So, we put these text file data inside text key, and then we set its action to file downloaded action, and then we send broadcast using context, and inside send broadcast we specify intent which represent our data. So, how this works? first this service start activity runs, then start button is pressed. So, this download service is started. Here on start command is fired, we display inside toast that service is started. We check network connection and download text file. If network connection is not available, we simply display message internet is not connected, and here we run start sticky. So, our service will continues to run in background even if it is finished, and inside on destroy we display that service is stopped. Now, when on start command is finished, we send downloaded file back to the our activity using send broadcast method, which takes intent as argument, and this intent takes our downloaded file with key text. So, it again come back to this service activity, and here we declare one intent filter, and in intent filter we add action which is with same name specified in this download service. So, when this intent finished, we have register this receiver with intent receiver and with this intent filter. So, inside receiver we have on receive method where we take reference of edit text, and inside these edit text we display these text data in edit text. So, since we have registered these intent receiver with these intent filter, when intent finished, on receive method is called, and inside that we get data from these intent using get string extra method, and we set this data as a text for our edit text. So, this is how this download service works. Now, next we want to discuss timer services. So, timer services also added like download services by right clicking on these package and new and service and service. So, this is how this service is added. Here we declare one counter variable and one timer object with name timer. So, inside on start command we first display that service is started, and we will use schedule at fixed rate method of timer object, and it takes 3 argument. First is a timer task, this is shown in highlighted portion on screen, and inside run we write down task that we want to perform repeatedly. So, here we have used logging features and D represent debug. So, in logcat window you will receive message with my service and value of counter. So, it in background continuously log our counter value, and these 0 represent that these fixed rate method should be immediately start without any delay, and these 1000 represent time in millisecond for which this run method is repeated. So, here 1000 represent 1 second, for every 1 second this run method is called. So, in log we continuously receive counter value with tag my service at 1 second without any break, and here we write down return start underscore sticky to continuously run these services until it is explicitly stopped. So, when you press these second button, when you press first button it starts download service, when you press third button it starts timer service, when you press second button it stops download service, and when you press fourth button it stops timer service. Because here we write down that stop service, and inside download service in on destroy we write down service is stop. So, when you press that button, toast message is displayed, service stop. So, this is how these two service is used to perform asynchronous task and repeated task. Now, finally, we discuss download intent services, which is a very similar to ordinary service, but inside these service we have, instead of on start command, we have on handle intent method. So, inside these download services which extend intent service, we declare one text which represent our text file, and this is our constructor, and inside on handle intent we write down code that we want to perform asynchronously as a separate thread than main activity. So, inside this try catch block we write down very similar logic to previous services, which is download service. Here we first check network connection and then we try to download text file if network connection is available. If not available, we display toast message, internet is not available, and if something goes wrong, we display that using toast. So, these check network connection and download text file we have already discussed in networking session. So, we are not going to discuss these two functions, but here when this message handler is called, inside these we create one intent and set it action to file downloaded action, and we put this text file as a text key inside this intent, and then we send this intent to activity using send broadcast method, which takes intent as an argument. And when this downloading is finished, it will automatically go to our service activity where we have registered one intent filter with that action sent by service, and here we register this intent filter with our broadcast receiver, and when this intent is that service is finished, it will call this on receive method where you can take reference of edit text, and finally we display this downloaded file in edit text. So, this is how our all services are run. Now, next you have to require certain permission in manifest file. So, here in order to download our content we require two permissions, same as a networking. So, here we require internet and access network state. So, these two permissions are required, and here when you add services, it will automatically added inside your manifest file. So, we have three services: download service, timer service, and download intent service that is automatically added in your manifest file. Now, we want to test and run these application in our emulator. So, here I am pressing run service activity button. So, this start button will launch our application in emulator. Here on screen you can see our application is running in emulator. So, when I press this first button, which is a start download service, it will open this text file inside our edit text. So, if you can see on screen, it first displays service started, then it will check internet is connected, and then it displays our text file inside these edit text, and when I press these stop download services, it will call on destroy method of that service, and inside that we write down service stop. So, our service is explicitly stopped, and when I press these start timer services, it will continuously log counter value with tag my services in log window. So, here I am pressing start timer services. Here if you follow mouse pointer, you can see it displays counter value continuously with tag my service and D represent debug, and when you want to stop this counter, you have to just press this stop timer service. If you can see, now my timer is stopped at value 20, and you can again start this counter by pressing this start timer service, and here on screen you can see now it starts with 1 and continue to follow until this stop timer service is pressed. Now, here we have to remove this old data, so that you can come to know this data is updated. So, if I press this start download intent service, it will call intent service which need not to stop, and it automatically stop when finished. So, here I am pressing start download intent service, which updates my edit text to text file, and we need not to stop these service explicitly, and it retrieves text file from server and return to activity using broadcast intent, and here using intent filter and broadcast receiver we have received that file and display it in edit text. So, this is how you can implement different types of services: service that perform task asynchronously, service that do repeated task, and service which do not need to stop explicitly can be implemented. So, today we have learned how to perform asynchronous task using services, how to do repeated task inside services, and we have also learned how to use intent service and established communication between service and activity using broadcast receiver and intent filter. So, I hope you enjoy this session. Thank you and happy learning.
स्वाध्यायः परमं तपः।
स्वाध्याय टीवी